The other day, my lunch consisted of tasty, fresh veggies and rice, and it made me feel so good, like spring in my step and a boost in my brain kind of good. And this got me rethinking about how what we eat can impact how we feel. And since I always think how different things impact dogs and their behavior, it reminded me that food is a very important tool in every guardian's toolbox when we are looking at the behavior of dogs. The consumption of food goes far beyond the provision of energy and nutrients necessary for physical health. Studies done both on humans and animals show that what we eat can impact how we feel and behave. The studies done on humans showed that a mere mention or a picture of food can elicit positive or negative emotions. People with an eating disorder had increased negative emotional response like fear and disgust, and reduced positive response like happiness when looking at pictures of food. Another study looked at how human participants who have been food deprived for 6 and 24 hours reacted to food pictures and cues compared to non-food deprived participants. And food-deprived participants had a greater startle response while viewing appetizing pictures of food. They reported a greater arousal, interest, and lack of control while viewing food cues and showed an elevated heart rate response. And on the other hand, they rated food pictures as pleasant and as significantly more interesting than did the non-deprived participants. And these mixed results were explained by the researchers by the fact that participants were only looking at the pictures of the food and didn't get to eat it at any point. So the positive emotions were followed by the frustration of not being able to eat the food. I couldn't find a similar study done on dogs, but we should think about how the mere presence of food or an indication of its presence can impact the dog's behavior. We should put greater consideration, especially to situations where food is used as a training tool. Is it really as positive to the dogs as it's still perceived by many? More attention should also be paid to the dogs who don't have the best relationship with food. How does the presence of it influence them and their behavior? What about dogs who don't get to eat when they are hungry, but are rather fed on human schedule? And it's not just the food that impacts how we feel, but how we feel also impacts what and how we eat. I'll take a guess and say that majority, if not all of us, sometimes have cravings for so-called comfort foods that are usually high in fat, sugar, or energy density in general. These cravings usually appear when we feel low or are facing stressful times. No need to feel guilty about it. It's a common human and apparently also animal experience. Being stressed can result in both overeating or eating less than usual. And studies on rats showed that this depends on the severity of the stressor. Severe or uncontrollable stress usually reduced food intake, and moderate or low stress increased it. For example, social isolation and deprivation of play increased food intake in rats. Similar to humans, acute emotional distress in laboratory settings resulted in an increased intake of comfort foods in rodents, even when they were not hungry or had no homeostatic need for calories. Because of the way these comfort foods are used to alleviate unpleasant emotions and stress, some researchers started to look at them as a way of self-medication. The consumption of highly palatable foods stimulates hypothalamic release of opioids, which elevate mood and satisfaction. And the secretion of glucocorticoids, which happens as a response to stress, is another avenue that's been studied in relation to stress-induced and emotional eating. Namely, their elevated levels increase appetite. And based on the research that has been done on this, there's a reason why these cravings exist. The study said that it's likely that stress-induced activation of the emotional brain is reduced in laboratory animals and people with available palatable foods and plentiful energy stores. There were a couple of studies done on dogs that talk about this. The first two showed that certain foods can dull the stress response. And what's even more interesting and also a very important information is that this effect was enhanced when it was combined with positive human contact. The third study found that a specific diet seemed to improve dogs' ability to cope with stress and reduced anxiety-related behaviors. Us humans have the option to choose the preferred type of comfort food anytime we need, and this same choice is usually not available to our dogs. But emotional eater, either human or animal, will overeat whatever food is available in the absence of the preferred one based on considerable amount of evidence. How nutrition can impact mood is still a relatively new field of research, but the findings so far show that high-quality diets that are rich in nutritionally dense ingredients and low in refined, sugary, ultra-processed foods can beneficially influence our mood. Furthermore, a nutritious, well-balanced diet can also have stress-reducing benefits that improve brain functioning, shore up immune function, lower blood pressure, improve the circulation, and reduce toxins from the body. For example, nutrients like complex carbohydrates, some types of protein, vitamin C, vitamin B, magnesium, and selenium play a very important role in reducing the levels of cortisol, adrenaline, and other stress chemicals that activate the stress response. While we know that food impacts mood and consequently behavior, we so far don't have a clear answer on how this happens. And if we think about how complex the mechanisms behind this connection are, there probably isn't just one right answer. So far, the possible answers are: first, diets with high glycemic index can impact mood negatively through repeated and rapid increases and decreases in blood glucose. High glycemic load and its compensatory responses could lower plasma glucose to the point that hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, growth hormone, and glucagon are triggered. This can cause changes in anxiety, irritability, and hunger. Furthermore, mood disorders have been connected to rapidly low blood sugar levels. Also, the inflammatory response to foods with high glycemic index can negatively impact mood. Second, mental well-being can be connected to the gut microbiome. A complex bidirectional connection between gut and brain is understood to act as pathways for potential effects on mood, cognitive, and emotional processes. One study cites gut microbiota can metabolize food from the host into a variety of metabolites that then may enter host circulation and influence the central nervous system, while the brain may affect the gut microbiota by influencing gut motility, secretion, and permeability. And a fun fact, a majority of serotonin, whose function doesn't include just mood, but also cognition, reward, learning, memory, is also produced in the gut. And genetic factors, exposure to antibiotics, and diet can influence the diversity, abundance, and functionality of the gut microbiome. And third, To function properly, brain relies on a delicate balance of neurotransmitters. Their production and availability is strongly influenced by the foods we consume. For example, deficiency of nutrients such as vitamins B, vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, and antioxidants can drastically affect the mood because they regulate and balance the neurotransmitters responsible for adjusting mood. From complex carbohydrates to omega-3 fatty acids, there are multiple different foods or nutrients that can have beneficial influence on the individual's mood. However, when we try to find research that has been done on dogs, we run into two main problems. Research on dogs and how food can impact their mood is limited, and the findings can often be contradictory. But based on the overwhelming evidence that has been accumulated by studies on different mammals, we shouldn't disregard the promising results on connection between food and mood. What we feed our dogs should definitely be on our mind, since all current research shows that a nutritious, well-balanced diet has a positive impact on the individual's well-being. But we have to keep in mind that diet is just one piece of the puzzle. How an individual feels or behaves is influenced by multiple factors beyond nutrition, such as genetics, environment, psychological factors like stress and trauma, and also individuals' physiology and metabolism can also play their part in response to different dietary intakes. So let's be mindful of what, how, and when we feed our dogs, while at the same time realizing that the diet is not the only thing that impacts their behavior.